World of Horror is a very strange game, and in many ways. The subject matter is one thing, but the way that it plays has odd rules as well. It's also really unbalanced, broken, and just straight up glitchy. Not to mention that it's very clearly unfinished despite having a supposed official release now. There's so much about this game that I should hate, and I have a hard time giving it a recommendation without plenty of warnings about it, but I'm surprisingly drawn to it and I find it really fun. The theme of World of Horror is inspired heavily by the works of Japanese horror artist Junji Ito, along with a healthy dose of H.P. Lovecraft and general macabre imagery. The story has the player choosing from one of several characters who, in their own way, have had their eyes open to the terrible truths of the world and the universe. You learn that an all-powerful eldritch god will soon awaken, and its arrival is the cause of many odd events occurring all over town. You haven't much time to spare. You must solve the horrifying mysteries gripping the town that somehow link to the ancient god and prevent its awakening, else the world is doomed. As I said, you start each new game by selecting a character, each with their own stats and starting item that encourages a specific playstyle. You also select from various other modifiers, such as the timeline that produces its own unique events, your backstory that can throw more hurdles in your way, and you even choose the eldritch god that gets summoned, which you're ultimately fighting against. There's a good variety of different combinations you can choose from before you even start playing the game, which certainly helps with the replay value, at least in theory. Once you actually begin playing the game proper, you start by choosing from one of 5 randomly selected mysteries. You need to solve all 5 mysteries and then complete the final challenge in order to win the game. I'm usually a gameplay first kind of guy, but the presentation is so cool and it's a huge part of what sells the game. It's a style that evokes of a much older era of video games, the kind that ran on IBM PCs, MS-DOS, really old stuff. If you're familiar with the original Macintosh release of Uninvited, then you'll have an idea of the look I'm talking about. You can choose between 1 or 2 bits of color, depending on the level of graphical depth that you prefer, as well as a slew of preset colors to create a look that works for you. Despite the graphical limitations and extremely simple animations, the artwork is so beautiful. There's so much expression in each character, environment, and some of the artwork can be legitimately horrifying. The music is just as effective. Again, it's purposely made to sound limited in order to imitate those old computer games, but it sounds so good. There are several different themes based on which mystery you're solving, and the song will transition into a battle version when combat takes place, so you won't hear the same songs often enough to get bored. The songs themselves are just really cool, with low, dark ambiance, but plenty of rocking beats too. There's no voice acting and not a whole lot to say about the sound effects, but the music alone is enough to carry in the audio department. Tying all this together is the fantastic writing. There is a lot of reading in this game, but it's all presented in a way that's easy to go through. Most text is kept succinct, but there's enough detail to help draw a good image along with the graphics and limited animation. The stories told in each of the individual mysteries range from okay to really, really good. It's a combination of unusual circumstances and disturbing details that manages to create a surprisingly uncomfortable and unsettling atmosphere. Not all the mysteries are home runs, but there is a good amount of variety. Some of them can be a little humorous in a way, while others are insanely absurd in how far they go with the occult and otherworldly themes. The dialogue and internal thoughts can be a little dry, but it is understandable since all of the writing needs to be able to fit each character. Because of this, none of the playable characters have any real personality, but it still works well enough for what the game is going for. The presentation is excellent. I absolutely love how this game looks and sounds, but the gameplay has a lot of issues. First off, let me get this out of the way. Although I'm playing this game on the PS5 and it runs perfectly fine, I would recommend against buying this game on consoles. The entire game is controlled via point and click, and I'm disappointed that the PlayStation release doesn't have the option for keyboard and mouse controls. For those who don't know, the PS4 and PS5 consoles can recognize keyboard and mouse, although very few games utilize the feature, but this would have been a good one. On a regular controller, you can use the shoulder buttons and face buttons for some shortcuts, but for the most part, you're dragging that mouse around with the joystick. It works fine enough, but it's hardly ideal. Anyway, if you are gonna get the game, get it on PC. As for the gameplay, it's essentially a point-and-click adventure, although there's much less of an emphasis on puzzles and problem solving. The main focus comes down to time and resource management. Most of your actions, essentially anything that advances time, will increase the Doom meter, which is a measurement of how close the Eldritch God is to awakening, and it's an instant game over the moment it reaches 100%. You'll also need to keep track of your stamina and your reason, both of which act as your health, and if either one drops to 0, you lose the game. Progressing in the game involves investigating different parts of the town associated with your chosen mystery, although you'll also want to consider shopping for weapons, items, and recruiting allies to help your chances at surviving against the horrors of the world. Every action takes time, so you need to balance everything carefully in order to make it to the end. No matter what you do, however, there's still plenty of luck involved. Probably too much luck, mostly in the form of random events. There are a ton of these, and the ones you'll get at any given time are dependent on the area you're currently investigating. The majority of these events give you 2 or more choices in how to deal with what's happening, and most of them have a Dungeons & Dragons style dice roll to determine the outcome. Your character stats include strength, dexterity, perception, knowledge, and charisma, as well as some others like a hidden luck stat. Unfortunately, you won't know what action is based on what stat until after you've already made your decision, and it's not always easy to guess what it might end up being. It is always the same results every time, dependent on a passed or failed dice roll, so I just ended up filling out my own spreadsheet that I reference whenever I play the game. That way I can stand a better chance, especially since some very important items are hidden behind some of these choices. Now, I'm still at the mercy of a dice roll, and several of these don't have stat checks at all, but it's important to have an idea of what you're getting into, since too many failed events can easily ruin a run. I just wish a little tooltip window would pop up to give you an idea of what to expect, because otherwise I'm either going to have to memorize as much as I can, or I'm just gonna keep filling out this spreadsheet. If you don't run into a random event, then you'll have a combat encounter instead. Battles in this game essentially play out like a turn-based RPG, but it has a very interesting system behind it. You're given 200 points for actions to spend on each turn, with different actions costing different amounts of points. There's a lot you can do here with some neat experimentation, although for the most part, you're just going to use the same actions over and over. You'll increase your accuracy, swing your weapon at the enemy, and then attempt to dodge or block the counterattack depending on your character's stats. There is other stuff you can do, like examine the enemy for weaknesses or search for very minor items, but you're mainly just going to aim, attack, defend, and repeat for several turns in a row until the enemy dies. On top of that, about 90% of the game is just one-on-one battles. While you can recruit allies, they mostly play a supportive role and are rarely involved in combat directly. There are extremely rare combat encounters that pit you against 2 enemies at once, but even then it really doesn't amount to much. The concept behind the battle system is kind of cool, but the gimmick loses its appeal rather quickly, and the additional bits of depth like throwing items and utilizing enemy weaknesses don't really amount to all that much. At the least, there is more depth to it than merely auto-attacking, and you go through the battles rather quickly, so it's not so bad. What's a more serious problem is that the combat will sometimes fail to function properly. Like I said, you're given 200 points to spend on actions each turn, and each action has its points value displayed, but the math will randomly refuse to add up sometimes. Even if I have points to spare, it won't allow me to conduct certain actions. And even more bizarrely, I've actually gone beyond 200 points in a single turn before. As far as I can tell, it's never explained in-game, and it certainly doesn't seem to be intentional. Exploring the world is another issue. Most mysteries have this basic town map with all of your shops and other locales available, but some mysteries will later transition to what I call a unique map, where you lose access to the town while you explore a forest or a mansion or something else for several turns in a row. For some mysteries, the entire mission takes place in a unique map. This is a huge problem because having access to some of these services, such as resting at home or visiting a police station, can easily make or break a run, and losing access to them for long periods of time hurts a lot. Similar to the random events, none of this is explained ahead of time, and it's very easy to get trapped in unwinnable situations because you weren't expecting the game to lead in a certain direction, even if it was predetermined to happen. What makes it worse is if you're doing a mystery you've done before already and you forget that it's going to occur and you accidentally fall into the same scenario again, because it is a rather uncommon occurrence, but it can be so devastating when you aren't prepared for it. The game will lock you out of the town, and depending on the mystery, it'll arbitrarily lock you out of your storage too, and in ways that make no sense. Certain mysteries let you access your storage, while others don't, simple as that. One mystery requires the player to reference a set of specific instructions, but if your inventory is full when you're supposed to receive that document, then you're just screwed. The way that some of these rules are designed is so stupid. While some of this stuff can be excused as merely being quirks of the game that you can get used to, what I can't excuse are the glitches, misleading text, and clearly unfinished nature of the game. It took me a good while to figure out how the cigarette items work because the game never points out the small, dedicated cigarette icon along the top of the screen. The school rooftop has options tied to it that are apparently unusable and serve no purpose. There's this one item, the vanity mirror, that's supposed to provide additional information for event choices, which is something I feel like should just be standard to the game, but I've never gotten the item to work. It doesn't seem to do anything. There was one event I got where I would be allowed to cast a spell for free without incurring a penalty cost, but of course, lo and behold, I got penalized anyway. Oh, and you see those scroll bars on the side of the window for your storage? Yeah, they don't do anything. You'd better be careful not to store too many items or you'll just throw them away without the game telling you. And seriously, would it kill the developer to show what the current maximum stamina and reason are? It's a pain in the ass to memorize the current value, especially when they keep fluctuating due to different items, curses, the game's difficulty, and other such nonsense. There's an achievement where you need to handcuff an enemy named the Ultimate Opportunist, which I've done 4 times now, and the achievement just refuses to unlock. I've already explained the glitchy combat things, and several items, like the broken VHS tape, seem to serve no purpose despite implying otherwise. But believe me, there are so many other examples. This game was simply not ready for release. I understand that it's pretty much made by one guy with hardly any budget, but if you're charging money for a game, then I'd say I have the right to complain when there's a problem. There are a couple of extra game modes to help extend the overall value. The challenge mode places you in specific scenarios that contradicts an intended playstyle, basically giving you a permanent and strict debuff, or forcing you to beat the game by using only magic. It forces the player to come up with unique strategies, which is pretty cool, but you're still essentially rolling the dice a lot and hoping for good luck. There's also an endless mode, which pits the player in a series of infinite random events and battles until the player finally succumbs. Along with quite a few unlockable characters and items, there's certainly enough to keep you coming back for more, at least in theory. Due to how the game is set up to be so random, it's essentially a roguelike when you get down to it, the ultimate goal is to complete this massive checklist of achievements, which includes beating the game with every character and meeting specific conditions. That's all fine and good, but not when the game doesn't work consistently. The way that events play out, asking you to rely on luck and memorization, is pretty dumb, and the many glitches and unimplemented features is extremely frustrating. There's even supposed to be a save and quit feature in case you want to turn off the console and finish a run later, but selecting it has a good chance to erase all of your game progress. All of the secrets and achievements I've unlocked, back to nothing. I've had this happen twice. Again, this game was not ready for a full release. It's been worked on very slowly for over 5 years, and it clearly needed even more time to finish properly. Here's the main conundrum. When you're first playing through World of Horror, everything feels fresh and new, and it's not always fair, but it is always interesting. After several hours, you start to learn the rules, the intricacies, and you're able to plan your runs a lot better to help ensure a victory. Once you get to that point, however, the game starts to fall apart. You run into more glitches, the events start to feel similar, combat can be a bit of a chore, and you'll run into more scenarios that feel like unavoidable losses, such as getting 3 mysteries that all take place entirely in unique maps. Because of the very nature of the game and how much of it is based on luck, you'll need to have a lot of patience, which can be okay, but not when the game fails to function properly. A good buddy of mine that recommended this game to me explained it by saying that it is a great game despite the developer's intentions to sabotage it, and I wholeheartedly agree. There are a lot of good ideas here, the foundation is in place, and I love the atmosphere that it's going for, but at the very least, this guy needs a proper programmer who can get everything up and running properly and fix that damn spaghetti code that seems to barely hold this game together. There's so much that I love about this game, but also so much that I hate, and I can't give it a recommendation without the caveat that you're basically buying a game that's pretending it's no longer in early access. All that being said, to be honest, I'm actually still enjoying this game quite a bit, but logically speaking, there's no way I can give it a real recommendation in this state. Thanks for watching my review on World of Horror.